Okay, welcome. This is my presentation on grey market enhancement drugs and their availability through some licit digital market spaces. So I'm going to define what I mean by grey market enhancement drugs and talk about their sort of availability through sites such as Amazon, eBay, and Alibaba, spaces like that where they're being sold, and address the question of whether this raises concerns for public health. So just a bit of background to contextualize the presentation. What am I talking about in relation to human enhancement drugs and why are they important to focus on? So there's quite a range of different enhancement drugs, a variety of different types. There's cognitive enhancers. There's been work on sort of microdosing with psychedelics, as well as more typical modafinil and drugs of that sort. But primarily what's been focused on in the enhancement drug literature is examining the sort of image and performance enhancing drugs. There's also sexual enhancers and that sort of thing. But primarily of interest, certainly in my work previously, we've been exploring these image and performance enhancing drugs. So rates of this drug use seem to be increasing. There's been some studies in sort of needle and syringe programs where they've identified that actually the majority of people accessing these programs now are accessing them because they're steroid users, and sort of different surveys looking at rates of use have identified that actually enhancement drugs do seem to be used by a lot more people. So, as I said, there's a range of enhancers. One of the key focuses has been on these sort of image and performance enhancing drugs, so steroids, growth hormone, and that sort of thing, or melanotan 2 is another image enhancing drug. So a lot of research in that area that's been very good, very interesting, including my own prior research, and links to sort of social media pressures and body image and the development of this with sort of fitness culture, digital fitness cultures on Instagram and so forth becoming ever more popular. I've used this example. You've probably seen this guy's picture posted all over the internet as kind of the example of that blend of, I don't know how much is steroids, how much is just Photoshop, but there's been this real spread of kind of this ideal on social media of ever more traditional ideas of masculinity exaggerated in kind of image presentation, and of course there's been other good work on women's representation on social media. So this has been one of the sort of key drivers of the increase, so far as we can tell, and certainly I identified that in some of my prior presentations. What's been interesting is that there's been a focus in some more recent publications on wellness-oriented enhancement. So Underwood et al., Dunn et al., Harvey et al., I've cited all of those there, look at sort of testosterone replacement therapy and this idea that men who have symptoms of sort of fatigue, of depression, lack of motivation, that this could be a symptom of having low testosterone, so they're using testosterone, black market testosterone, in order to sort of feel better and enhance their wellness. And I've currently got a paper undergoing revisions sort of in this area, looking at this concept of wellness enhancement, looking at sort of the more illicit steroids, and perhaps this will be a nice counterpiece for that when that's published. So what I'm focusing on in this presentation is the sort of enhancement drugs which fall into this image and performance enhancing drug class and have historically been used. I say historically, they're quite recent. The drugs I'm looking at, they're these novel synthetic peptide hormones, which were referred to as research chems when I was initially doing work in sort of 2014, 2015. People were calling them research chems. So synthetic peptide hormones. And that's going to be my focus here. And sort of their use beyond those cultures that they've previously been documented in, and looking at their increasing availability and what this might say about this expansion of people who are now using enhancement drugs for more wellness focused purposes. So just to quickly sort of define, we've looked at what is meant by enhancement drugs. What do I mean by grey market drugs? So there's been some good works on this concept of grey market drugs, these sort of less legal but perhaps not fully illegal products. In relation to image and performance enhancing drugs, we have drugs such as DMAA, which was in the supplement Jacked up until 2012 when it was banned from sale. You could no longer sell it, became a restricted supplement, no longer available over the counter. But of course, there's sort of this under the counter sale, if you will, in supplement shops where they have the products containing DMAA in the back, or they say, it's an American brand of pre-workout, which lets you know it contains things that the British brands aren't supposed to. And similarly, so sort of the pro hormones, where they're essentially steroids in terms of their chemical makeup, in terms of their effects. They're basically steroids, things like M1 Test or Superdrol, but at the same time, they're being sold as supplements. And of course, there are some supplements which don't make claims of what's in them that nonetheless have been identified as containing ostarine and things like that. So there's quite a few of these products out there which they're not fully illegal, but they can't be sold as supplements, or they're not supposed to be, yet are available in what are otherwise licit market spaces, such as online or real world local supplement shops. So I've noted the supply for these sort of parallels what we're seeing for the new psychoactive substances when they were being sold in head shops or online, and they were being sold as this is plant food, this is bath salts, this is research chems, right? Were the big ones, and I'm sure people saw all that going on at the time. Sort of 2008, it kind of hit public consciousness. So very similar in terms of availability through supplement shops and online, the way in which these drugs are sold. My specific focus, however, I'm going to sort of go beyond DMAA and those sorts of drugs and look at these, as I said, these synthetic peptide hormones, what a lot of powerlifters and bodybuilders and so on were calling research chems back in sort of 2015. So these have previously been identified as being bought through these online pharmacies that have been explored by quite a few researchers, where they're not actual pharmacies. They're illicit websites that are selling these products, and you make a bank transfer, and then they'll ship it out to you. And some concern was raised when it was sort of first identified that these products were being sold there. So Chemogod and McVeigh talk about this case where an individual bodybuilder bought what he thought was one of these products, but it actually was melanotan 2. So he was injecting, expecting to get certain effects, and was just getting darker and darker from injecting it. So I laugh because it's kind of funny, the image of a guy getting darker, but obviously potential for real harm if products are being mislabeled and could actually be far worse effects than that. So some concern about the legitimacy of product, or whether product's mislabeled, whether it's what it claims to be. And also, as I've noted, some of these synthetic peptides, such as BPC 157, are turning up in what are seemingly legal supplements, just as ostarine has been documented as turning up in a lot of what appear to be or are marketed as being legal supplements, but contain these products that they shouldn't. So what has caught my interest, I might go on to the next slide to discuss this, is I was doing this research in local gyms and on fitness forums, and as you can see, Facebook, and doing this ethnography and talking to people involved in lifting cultures. And as I said, back then, there was some awareness of these products, TB500, BPC 157, GHRP2, being discussed, all being bought from these online pharmacies, these somewhat dodgy websites, and kind of known as being in a similar class to steroids and growth hormone and that sort of thing in terms of how they were being accessed. Now, in 2020, I was talking, it's much later in my fieldwork than most of my sort of main findings I've published on so far. I was talking to an individual in a gym who was talking about how he had an elbow injury and he bought BPC 157 for repair. So nothing that far out of the ordinary so far, but he had bought it through Amazon Marketplace, which was news to me because everyone else I'd spoken to had bought them through online pharmacies. And he had said he bought this to repair this injury, and he had sort of negative side effects from taking it. Now, he had formerly been a steroid user. He was a steroid user back when he was sort of 22, 23. He was late 20s, early 30s now. And he said, I was having these effects where my balls, meaning scrotum, was like really itchy, really red and raw, really hot. And he said, I'm certain that was HCG in there, and I was using it as directed for BPC 157, which was too much HCG. And so he had used HCG before, and he knew what kind of effects he got from that. And he was fairly sure that this BPC 157, so as it was sold on Amazon, was actually HCG. So potential for harm there, similar to this what Kimiko and McVeigh identified. So this kind of caught my interest, but particularly that he bought it through Amazon, because the side effects and the not being sure about whether product's legitimate, same we've seen before in discussing online pharmacy product. To my knowledge, no one's actually published on the extent to which these products, these sort of novel synthetic peptide hormones, are available in otherwise legal market spaces. So building on the research I'd done in gyms and forums and so forth, I conducted a bit of further research into digital pages on Amazon, eBay and Alibaba, and did this June 2020. So this was purposive sampling using the products that had been identified in ethnographic fieldwork, so the GHRPs and those types of secretagogues, the TB500, BPC 157, CJC 1295, all those which people had mentioned to me in my ethnography, looking way back in 2014, 2015 for some of those. I used that to inform what I was searching for on these websites. Then I went to seller pages and I would capture all the other products that they sold, and as you'll see, we're talking hundreds of pages of different products available. So in addition to the online pharmacies they were historically sold through, that bodybuilders and powerlifters and so on were buying through, actually it seems that they are being openly advertised on these more mainstream sites and advertised for repair purposes, and that perhaps is bringing in this kind of new class of user who actually never would have bought them when they were these obscure products on these slightly dodgy sites used by bodybuilders, but now actually we'll get into, but as you'll see, quite openly available. So in terms of availability, as I said, there was quite a range of these grey market products, particularly the peptide hormones being quite openly sold on Amazon. And as you can see in the image I've used there, some of them have got multiple reviews, have been bought and used by different customers. I'll come to some extracts of that later. So as I said, quite a few products, and I identified 3 different types of seller that seem to be operating on these sites. And Amazon is sort of my primary example because that's where the participant in the local research told me he had bought product through, and that's where most of the end user product appears to be being bought. I'll get into Alibaba a bit later. So the 3 types of seller supply operation that were operating on Amazon June 2020, we had the larger enhancement drug specific sellers, and I will break those down on the next slide. I've got some detail on those sellers on the next slide and the range of products they had. There were also some supplement sellers which stocked some of those grey market products. So like Red Kite Supplements had Hydropharm Unbreakable pills, which are BPC 157, so that contains this peptide hormone as well. And some of these sort of smaller scale individuals who seem to be the same sort of people who I cited earlier from the Facebook. You saw the image from Facebook, somebody advertising he had TV500, get in contact with him if you wanted to buy some. Seems to be those same sorts of individuals are also operating on like Amazon Marketplace and eBay, doing very small scale supply. So that's sort of the three types of seller that I came across. And eBay, it was predominantly the last of those three. I think some of the supplement sellers as well, but they didn't seem to have this presence of the larger enhancement drug specific sellers that Amazon did. It was more sort of individuals posting odd things that you could buy. But Amazon had some quite substantial sellers for these sort of not necessarily legal supplements to be sold as supplements, and we'll get into sort of the practices around that. But I've sort of given the game away a little bit, talking about them being referred to as research chems, right? So let's talk about the availability. Three larger of these enhancement drug specific sellers were identified, and they had quite a range of products. So I captured their pages and their product pages. As you can see, I've got an example that's from Trident Peptide over on the right. As you can see, BPC 157 has 9 different reviews. So one of the more popular ones that was bought. And as you can see on the labels there, not for human consumption, which we'll get into. But in terms of the products, so the largest seller seemed to be this company, Pharma Labs Global. They had 75 different products, 25 of those being injectable peptide hormones of the type you can see there, where you mix them with backstatic water and you inject those using insulin syringe. 24 were nasally or orally administered peptides. 4 were nootropics, again, sort of similar to modafinil. And then they had a range of other products, which were sort of various well-being vitamin supplement combinations. You know, you often see the alpha male vitamin and things, and it's just a combination of like natural products and vitamins, but sort of fits with the theme of wellness enhancement that you see these synthetic peptides being advertised towards. Trident Peptide, as you can tell from the name, they were wholly focused on these peptides. They had 18 products, 16 of which were these injectable peptide hormones. One was a special peptide mixing water, so just a 10 ml vial of backstatic water that you could draw from to fill up your various vials of peptides. And then finally, Direct Express, very similar to Trident Peptide, 19 products, all of them being injectable peptide hormones. So about the labeling and advertising, this is what I think is interesting in terms of who is it bringing in, who is it meant to appeal to? Because as I said, bodybuilders and powerlifters sort of some cultural awareness pre-existing, but these are mostly advertised based on well-being and wellness and injury repair and that sort of thing. And a lot of these products make these claims about beneficial effects to health. So as you can see, I have this product description from BPC 157, stands for Body Protective Compound 157. So I believe this is another growth hormone secretagogue. And it says main benefits include improved healing. BPC 157 can accelerate the body's natural healing processes by increasing the activity of the body's growth hormone receptor. It can also ramp up the body's collagen production. Below are some of the conditions that BPC 157 can treat, and this is a significant bit. Advertised for burns and cuts, eye injuries, fistulas, sprained or torn ligaments and tendons, liver damage from chronic alcohol or drug use included, muscle tears or pulls, nerve damage, preventing scar tissue from forming, which would be sort of tennis elbow, golf elbow would be quite important, rotator cuff also very relevant, and interestingly, spinal cord injuries, so nerve damage as well. Oh, it says nerve damage earlier than that. So obviously, people sort of looking for what can heal that. This is going to come up. This is what they're promoted and advertised for. So reading it alongside some of the discussions on forums, blogs, social media, that sort of thing, and of course my discussions with powerlifters and bodybuilders who have used this stuff or have an interest in this stuff but chose to use growth hormone or whatever. There's very clearly this is what they're being promoted as being used for. And it seems from some of the posts I've read, people talk about, I had an injury from golfing or tennis elbow or whatever, who have used it. It perhaps is extending beyond those, the bodybuilders who used steroids and took these on top, which is what we were seeing 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Now, perhaps there are people being brought in who are seeing this type of advertising, reading posts about how good these drugs are, and they're then buying them without that history of kind of cultural understanding of drug use, or being sort of IPED users as more traditionally understood. So I think that's quite important, but it's also relevant when we're talking about the availability and the advertising of these products to note they are clearly being advertised as enhancement drugs for consumption, yet simultaneously they're technically illegal, I believe, to sell as supplements or medicines. Now, this is where the parallels to the new psychoactive substances become very clear, because there was a juxtaposition in the products between these descriptions. As you can see, this example of CJC 1295, it says it gives you lean body mass, gains in muscle mass and increased strength, can reduce body fat, and gives quicker recovery times post-injury, and strengthens the immune system. So both on the sort of image and performance enhancing side, as well as on this wellness side being advertised, but very clearly says for research use only. And as we saw earlier, the Trident peptide, very similar company, had put not for human consumption on the vials versus Pharmalabs Global's for research use only. So they're clearly being advertised and promoted for use, and yet simultaneously, how are they able to be sold when they're not supposed to be sold as supplements or medicines? It's because they're being sold as research chems, research products. So kind of calling to mind way back in 2015 when I was talking to people saying I've been taking research chems, meaning GHRP2 or whatever. Actually, this is still ongoing because it's a way to kind of evade restrictions on what can be sold. So interesting parallels there, I think, with new psychoactive substances. But in terms of usage and customer reviews, of course, they do seem to be being used for human consumption. So numerous products have multiple ratings and reviews from customers, and as you can see, customer questions asked and answered. So we've got some examples there: 6 ratings, 9 ratings, 4 questions answered, 5 questions answered. So it does seem to be some interest in these products, and the fact that they're asking and answering questions sort of on dosage and how long do you use it for, how much do I take in a day, not the sort of questions bodybuilders are going to be asking, or powerlifters, because they already know, they've already done that research, which is what's leading me to believe it's a broadening customer base, and it's no longer those people who are experienced with image and performance enhancing drugs, and it's sort of a new category of user who is more wellness focused, just wants to feel good primarily. So as you can see, some of the reviews that have been posted, as you can see, these are verified purchases. This isn't just the owners of these companies putting up sock puppet reviews, as may happen with some companies. So this one, healing, great product, heals injuries. Another one, lives up to its name as the Wolverine drug. Says hurt his injured his elbows from bodybuilding and had golfers and tennis elbow. So this one actually is a bodybuilder, but nonetheless talks about after 2 weeks it was healing. In his 3rd week, no longer had the pain, and all his strength had come back using BPC 157. So very much being used for those stated purposes of injury repair and healing, which kind of lends itself towards this idea of, is there this wellness category of user who perhaps wouldn't historically have been IPED users, as steroid users are, who are now buying these because they're seen as like a more legal or a more acceptable product. Now, in terms of regulation of these products, it's interesting to ask, do Amazon sort of knowingly allow these sales of these products? And are they fine with just, it says research use only, it says not for human consumption, therefore we're not going to bother ourselves because we're sort of covered? Or is it that this is sort of gaming of the algorithms? So I've used this example of syringe being sold on Amazon. Technically, you're not allowed to sell needles on Amazon, as far as I understand, and I think that's because they would want people going to needle and syringe programs so that they're getting the advice at the same time as they're getting the needles. You can sell syringes on Amazon, you're just not supposed to sell needles. So how do they get around this to cheat the algorithm and actually sell needles as well? As you can see in this example, this pack contains 10 times 1 ml syringes, 10 times blunt attachments, 14 gauge times 1.5 inches. So openly selling needles and syringes, but they're just not calling them needles, so they don't get flagged by the automated system. So potentially a similar thing going on with BPC 157, CJC 1295. That's kind of product where maybe Amazon isn't actually approving what's being sold, it's just it's not getting flagged because they've used the right language in there. Now, I'm going to jump across to Alibaba quickly, and we'll come back to Amazon in a second. But in talking about these products, these labs, so-called, these sellers on Amazon, they're resellers. I would be about 99.9% sure that they're resellers, not actual labs. Where are they sourcing their product? It would seem they're sourcing it from Alibaba. So searching Alibaba, I got hundreds of results. As you can see, 674 results for GHRP. I've used there, highlighted there. So a lot of these sellers, it's these Chinese labs that you used to have to have a contact with, and you would contact them directly. I've written about that with Jim's experiences running a lab in the UK. I know Katinka van der Ven's also written about sort of the contact with those Chinese labs. I believe Krasker et al. Did as well. So there's been some work looking at it in the context of steroids. What's interesting is Alibaba, I believe, banned the sale of steroids, although that was comparatively recently. Interestingly, when I was doing research in 2014, you could, in fact, buy trenbolone powder and things, or what claimed to be that. I obviously never conducted any actual quantitative research on that. University ethics being a bit difficult to navigate at the old institution, but they banned the sale of steroids at some point. Still have these growth hormone secretagogues, analogs, synthetic peptide hormones. So this seems to be where the people on Amazon are sourcing the product, which they're then reselling, and they're putting their labels on. Now, what's interesting is that this is a service actually offered by a lot of these Chinese suppliers who have listings on Alibaba. As you can see, I've included an example on the slide where you can pay. No, excuse me, you don't even have to pay. If you have made a minimum order of 100 boxes, they will allow you to have a customized logo and customized packaging. So this is significant when we talk about sort of harm reduction and labeling. If anybody's either watched my presentation on steroid brewing operation, where I spoke to one of the guys running it, or if you've read my article on it for Performance Enhancement and Health, you'll be aware that one of the practices there in steroid labs, illicit underground steroid labs, is they were creating the product, putting it in vials using colored caps to denote what was in it, sending it out to the guys who were then selling in the gyms, and that next level of guy down were the ones putting labels on. So that's why there's sometimes a mismatch in labels in terms of what quality is advertised, and that sort of thing is often it's not the labs themselves actually putting the labels on and putting them in boxes. And so when they're claiming to be pharma, when it's actually underground product, often it's that guy one level down from the lab who's actually doing that. This is interesting because it seems to be a similar situation with these synthetic peptide hormones, that actually there is a service being run by these Chinese suppliers who are customizing logos, customizing packages, so they know that this is going on. They know that people want to resell it and market it as something it isn't, whether they're saying it's from a European-based pharmaceutical company, for instance. You slap a label on that says Deutsche Pharma, made in Germany. That seems to be a service that's being offered, for instance. And Anthony, who I mentioned earlier, who was having negative effects, his product that he bought from Trident Peptide on Amazon said batch EU in the batch number, and of course, almost certainly, in fact, came from China. So perhaps some misrepresentation and perhaps some potential for harm, as we saw in Kimagard and McVeigh's earlier piece about Milano tan, rather than the product that was intended to be bought. So definitely interesting to keep in mind these kind of practices at the more wholesale level when buying through Alibaba. So think about the implications for public health policy. There's sort of two main areas that I think are interesting to explore. The first is looking at product quality. We've already seen an issue with some of the product that was bought through online pharmacies historically. Are the products that are being bought on sites such as Amazon, are they better regulated because they're on these illicit sites? Or does the fact that they come with these labels saying not for human consumption, for research purposes only, show us that because they're deliberately intended to evade restrictions, they're actually not likely to be of any better quality than online pharmacies? But of course, people who are buying them who may not be embedded in the scene, which is the topic I'll talk about next, they might not be aware that that could be an issue. So, as I said, the guy I spoke to, Anthony, in the local ethnographic research, not his real name, obviously, he thought that he had bought mislabeled product from Amazon. So I think the very first thing that we need to do is quantitative testing of some of these compounds. And as I've noted, there's been testing of CBD vapes and that sort of thing, which is also in this kind of grey market area, and they've similarly sort of identified some issues there with product quality and so on. So I think very relevant to explore. In terms of what I was saying about use and access, with this increasing availability, if they're on these very mainstream websites and if they're being advertised as, this is really good for your well-being, it supports your immune system, it can help heal injuries and heal chronic conditions, are they appealing to sort of regular people who don't have the experience, or don't have the culturally embedded advice mechanisms that bodybuilders and powerlifters and so on have? As I've noted, Van der Ven and Mulrooney have explored this, Orlando Harvey and her team have explored it. Stripped of that, are we going to see more harm from uninformed use? Because powerlifters, reading up on these compounds and doing research on these compounds is one thing. Somebody who asks a question of the seller on the Amazon page and says, how long should I use this for? How many IUs should I use it for? Perhaps is more likely to experience harm from use. So even if it does turn out that all these products are legitimate, and it will be interesting to see based on the qualitative data I have from someone who had used one in the local gym environment, even if they turn out to be legitimate, is there still a need for sort of a public health awareness campaign around these products because of unexperienced people, which has similarly been discussed in terms of like people buying DMP online? That's a similar area where they type in fat loss pills, DMP comes up, and we've seen some like quite serious harms coming from that sort of thing have been documented. So in terms of next steps, I have some colleagues at the University of Lincoln who are hopefully going to be testing some of these products that were being sold on Amazon. So that's Jamie Harker, Ian Scowen, and Hilary Hamnett. Hopefully I'm going to be collaborating with them. They're going to do some testing. So when this comes to be written up and academically published, hopefully we will have some test results we can report, and we'll sort of frame our discussion and policy recommendations based on that. So that's kind of first step, what we want to do. In terms of, I've been saying, is the population that's using enhancement drugs widening with this wellness enhancement? I have an article coming up soon based on sort of TRT and injury repair and wellness enhancement within the bodybuilding and powerlifting communities. But it seems that there are people who are, golfers, who play tennis, who do like rock climbing, different sports perhaps not associated with it, who perhaps are using these types of drugs. And one relevant piece of data is I spoke to a breakdancer who was talking about some of the older breakdancers using growth hormone that they were buying from China because that would allow them to keep competing and keep dancing. So are people like that, now that there's more open availability of TB500, BPC157, that sort of thing, are we going to see more use of that kind of product by people not associated with these hardcore cultures that have historically used them, who have these kind of cultural embedded advice mechanisms? So I think very interesting. And then finally, I spoke to a guy involved in the running of a steroid brewing lab. It'd be interesting, if possible, to try and speak to somebody who's involved in one of these labs that is kind of reselling some of these synthetic peptide hormones, and just ask about these practices, ask about the labeling practices, and the access, and sort of whether they are buying from China in bulk and then reselling and attaching their own labels. So I think some interesting next steps for research, and I will keep you posted once this gets published and once I've conducted any further research. So thank you for watching.